What is Canada really? Have we been living in an illusion? These questions and more will be answered right here. Welcome to the Life Force Canada podcast. I am Karen, and I'm here to remind you of your true self, your original self, beyond the birth certificate, beyond your social insurance or driver's license identification. You're here on earth to ascend, to rise up from the false narratives and awaken to your true inheritance as a sovereign living man or woman. If a friend shared the link to our podcast, we recommend that you sign up on our website. If you become a member, we have free membership, we have a private membership, and we have a lot of resources that we offer to our amazing community of pioneers. Yay to our pioneers who are actually taking action on so many levels, discharging debt and creating trust, etc. We're here to navigate to higher levels of awareness and out of this murky mud of the human debt slavery system. We all know that the powers, I call them the powers that were, want humanity to stay dumbed down, to stay ignorant, to stay uneducated, so that they do not realize that they are enslaved and have been manipulated to believe in a false reality. And I get it. Truth can be a really hard pill to swallow. So before we get started, can we just all take a moment and send one of our Life Force Canada members lots of love and healing energy? Kurt was taken to palliative care. Him and Taser, his brother, have been assisting our private members in getting big CRA tax refunds. So let's just breathe in some life force energy and just send out lots of love to Kurt. Creating miracles right here. Okay, we're going to get right into this very important subject. I trust everyone here has seen the film, Canada, the Illusion. I know it's on many platforms and we uploaded it. I can't remember how many months ago now, but we uploaded it to our Life Force Canada YouTube channel and have over 54,000 views. Yay! Thank you everyone for sharing it. Our amazing tribe. Finally, people are actually waking up. We've been talking about this since 2020, about how Canada does not have a constitution. Canada's a corporation, not the land. The Corporation of Canada, we'll get into that. It's a really powerful distinction that we need to make, but every province, etc., is a corporation. The voting system is fake. And that there's no real political parties. It's just, they don't hate each other. It's a game. It's an award-winning movie performance. Well done. But many people are not ready to hear that yet. As long as they, the custodians of this realm, can make people believe and perceive that they have some kind of control, right? Perception is all it takes. The perception that the government cares for you, that people will continue to be enslaved and never really know the truth. I could go on. However, I have a few brilliant men here who are going to be sharing their incredible wisdom. We've got Timm Stein, the producer, and in collaboration, Xander LaRue. And I'm not too sure if Doug Force is here. I did talk to him a few days ago, and he was laying on his hospital bed, and he said, "Yes, I will be there." But I did call him today, and I haven't heard back yet. So I'm not too sure if he's going to be joining us this evening. But we do have Timm and Xander with us right now. So as everyone knows here, those who are live with us, I'm going to be interviewing Timm and Xander, and then after the interview is complete, we're going to open it up for a Q&A, and we ask that you put your question in the chat, and then after the interview, Esther will start the Q&A portion. To make it easy, please write the word question and then ask your question, and we'll move on from there. Okay. Thank you, Lonnie. Yes, Lonnie says, keep planting the seeds of truth. Absolutely. Hey, Tim, you did an extraordinary job on this film. Congratulations. Can
Thank
you,
you.
yeah, can you just give us a bit about your background? I was going to introduce you, but I would love for you to share your background and then what started you on this quest of Canada the Illusion.
Sure. My background is I'm originally from Germany, and I came to this landmass as an exchange student about 20 years ago. Fell in love with it. Met my wife here. We got two kids. I'm an engineer, and 2020 came around, and it was a couple years before 2020 when I had this sense in my gut that something was wrong, and I wanted to be out of the system. And 2020 came around, and I immediately felt something felt off about this. And I said, let's just stay put and keep an eye on things and see what happens. And I went down so many rabbit holes, and one of them was the myth is Canada and Doug Force. So it's thanks to Doug's decades of research and his fantastic website that I came upon this. I did a lot of reading, I did a lot of video watching, and from that rabbit hole, I went into other rabbit holes and pulled my kids out of school, started homeschooling. And at some point, about a year or two ago, I thought, wouldn't it be fantastic to teach this to the kids in the homeschooling group? Because it's great when our generation and older generations know this, but it's really the young generation and the children that will build upon this land. And if they don't know it, well, then what's ever going to take this down and create something new? So I asked Doug if he would be so kind to help me with the presentation to make sure I have all the facts correct. And he read through it and he left some feedback, and I presented it to the homeschooling group. And then while I was in the PowerPoint software, I looked at it and I thought, wait a minute, you can export this as a movie. I'm wondering if we could make a movie about this. And I know Doug had thought for a few years about making a movie. And I talked to him about it, and he said that's a great idea. I talked to Xander about it, and we, by the way, met through another channel on Telegram. When I watched two of Xander's videos, how he was trying to enlighten people about these facts, and I was blown away. And we connected and have talked almost on a daily basis ever since. So I started making this movie by exporting a PowerPoint presentation. And then I thought, okay, we need some really good footage. It needs to be narrated because 50 minutes of just presenting facts is nice, but people these days are lazy. They don't want to read. And then it means they have to go back to the source documents and read more. So I was spending a lot of time playing around with narration, with AI software, with my own voice. I didn't like my own voice. And in the end, I think it turned out pretty well. It's not too long. I've heard criticism of people saying, "Oh, you didn't present all the facts." And I say, "Sure, we can do all the facts. That's a 16-hour movie. Nobody wants to watch that."
Exactly.
And the facts that really matter, those are the ones that are presented. Anything that happened in those years in between, yes, things happened, but it's not really relevant to what we need to achieve here. What we need to achieve is show people how they were deceived. Those were the two, three main points. Everything else, that's why I encourage everyone at the beginning of the movie, please go and read it, verify it. Maybe I missed something. If I missed something, please show me where, and I happily look at it. We can talk about it. But yeah, that's how we got to the movie. I don't get paid for this. It's all on my own time. Nobody gave me money to do this. It's all me, and it's just wanting to share knowledge and hopefully wake people up. That's the story behind this.
Thank you, Tim, for your energy, your time and commitment, and your dedication. We so appreciate you. Now, I have a few basic yet very important questions so that we have complete clarity. And then I know there is going to be a lot of people watching this replay in the future, and they may have not seen the film. So if we can just go into starting out with, is Canada a country?
No, it's a fictional country, but it's not a real country in a sense of an independent sovereign nation, like the 50 states to the south are. Or, to be honest, I don't know which place on earth is a legitimate country. I think out of the 193 countries that are there, I think pretty much all of them are some incorporated
Yes.
fictional thing that has nothing to do with sovereignty.
Absolutely. So true. Yeah, I mean, I've seen in down in Bradstreet, Canada is registered, with the United States corporation. All the provinces are incorporated. Yeah. And I love that you stated in the film is entirely based on facts, not opinions, and that the viewer is strongly encouraged to verify each fact. That's so important. And you're right, a lot of people do not want to do their own research. They're waiting for other people to do research, but that's the problem, is that in order for us to stand in our sovereignty, we need to research ourselves as well. So my next question is, does the British monarchy have authority over the landmass called Canada?
No, not
No.
at all. They lost that. They gave up that title. Let's put it this way. They gave up the title to the land on December 11, 1931, with the passing of the Statute of Westminster. And prior to 1931, it was a British colony. The Dominion of Canada was a British colony. There was never a federation of sovereign provinces. That was all fake. A confederation never happened. Um, so that's until 1931. That's when the Crown and Chancery gave up the allodial title. And I say the Crown and Chancery because that's sort of the Department of Lands of Great Britain. And of all the colonies, the Crown and Chancery was the one administering and holding title to the lands. So in 1931, through the hard work of Russell Rogers Smith, he was the one who helped with the Balfour Declaration and the Statute of Westminster with the wording. So I think it's thanks to him that he was sneaking in these things that are in section 2, 7, and 11 to make sure that no land after 1931 was a colony of Great Britain anymore. And another important part that people oversee is the Governor General, who was also the government. So it was never a queen or a king running it. I think 1878 is when they instituted the Governor General, and the Governor General was the sole government. It was one person running the government, and everyone else was reporting to him. That ended in 1931 as well. So since 1931, Great Britain has absolutely zero authority, zero power over this land.
Did you hear that, everyone? Thank you, Tim. That needs to be clarified in so many ways, so thank you for that. My next question is, are provincial governments legitimate, or like, why are they listed as corporations?
They are not legitimate because they're not de jure governments voted on by the people. So what happened after 1931, each province became a sovereign nation in itself. And that status to this day has not changed. It's basically a sovereign place in hibernation. What would have had to happen was that the people get together, hold a constitutional convention, agree on a constitution, and you can use the US Constitution as a good template and then
Yeah.
add things or remove things you don't like. And then the people would vote on it and they would seat a de jure government in each province. And then the provinces would then be able to get together and discuss, hey, do we actually want to have a union?
Mhm.
Maybe all 13 countries that are independent nations want to make one big country. Do we want to call it Canada? Who knows what we want to call it? Do we want a flag? Who knows what we want? But that's what should have happened. It didn't. And corporations, foreign corporations, were instead put in place that are masquerading as governments. So they're de facto governments, they're not de jure governments. And you can tell by, for example, Danielle Smith a couple years ago, I think it was just 2 years ago, she did her Sovereign Alberta in the United Canada Act or whatever it was called.
I broke that
And
down just to stop you there, Tim. I did. I went through that. I don't know if you saw that. The Sovereignty Act. That is a crazy document. If you want to do some time, Karen, if you want to talk about that,
Yeah.
because I saw a lot of people out in Alberta were throwing that up and waving that thing around, but nobody read it.
yeah,
So I wanted to see what it was, and I went and read it, and there is some absolutely bonkers stuff in there that will just floor you. And they even quote, like Tim was saying, like from 1867 to 1931, we were a colony, and the BNA Act wasn't a constitution. It created a corporation sole where the governor general was appointed by that crown and chancery, and then the letters patent were granted to give him the authority to run, right? In that Sovereignty Act that Danielle Smith put forward, she cites the 1867 BNA Act and like the 1930 there's an update, I think it was 1930. There's another act they put out, I can't remember which one it was, the Canada Act, I think it was 1930. And then
Mhm.
they cite the 1982 Canada Act, and like all of those documents are either not ratified or legally dead.
Right.
So
Yes.
and people don't know this because they don't read it. So I read that document because I saw it, and I started looking up in the Black's Law Dictionary the definitions of some stuff, and like going around and using some of the AI tools now to find definitions of what they're talking about. And it's crazy what's in there, and it's a completely, I don't even want to say it, like it's just a moot document. Like it doesn't do anything. Like except actually what it does do is it takes them out of any liability for anything that they do. Like there's a section there where it states like anything that they do, they can't be held accountable for.
yeah, that's one
And
of
I
the
can show
parts.
you.
And it's really just a 4 or 5 page document. But
Yeah, it's
what's
not long.
eye-opening, it's the same with people quoting the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, let alone the fact that it was never ratified. But if people were actually reading it, they would see in there that it states it applies to government only. And that's the
Yeah.
same with the Sovereignty Act in Alberta. It states in
Yeah.
there it applies to government only. So then that should make you think, well, wait a minute, why is that? Well, who is the government? Why doesn't it apply to me? And that should get you down the rabbit hole of a simple search on Dun and Bradstreet, seeing that Government of Alberta is a registered corporation.
And all the documents state too, it's not men and women, it's always person.
Yes.
Person. Everything in the, you read the 82 the charter, everything in there is in reference to a person or an individual. And right, if you go look in the dictionary, an individual in the classic like English dictionaries, it'll tell you it's a person,
An
right? So then if you
individual
go and
is a
look in a
sole
lot,
proprietorship.
yeah. And if you look in the documents there, it always says person. And if you look on the Interpretations Act that the government of Canada put out in 85, and there's another one in 2007, they updated it a little bit. They list a person, and the definition is a corporation. So all these documents that the Canadian government is putting out, it always has person in there. And when you look up their own definition of person, it's a corporation. So it's it's not what people don't understand this, and they think that this applies to you, and it's like it doesn't apply to you. It's and I mean section 32 in the Canada in the charter, that's where it states charter applies to, and there's an A and a B, and it's the government and the provincial governments. That's it.
Yes, yes, absolutely.
It
The
says it right
acts,
there.
right? The acts, the charters, the mandates, the bylaws only apply to corporations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and people get so upset about what the government's doing, and they don't realize it doesn't apply to you as a man or woman. But everyone's so identified with their own incorporation, which they're not even aware that they are incorporated through their birth certificate as well.
Yeah.
That's the biggest problem is people on a daily basis give consent to all this abuse by foreign corporations.
Yeah.
And the consent is given through a driver's license, through a provincial health card, through all kinds of forms, social security number. Anytime you sign a government form, you give consent. And if anyone wants to go down a really good rabbit hole about learning how to remove yourself from that, how to learn the word trickery, I won't call his website here because it's not the greatest word that's used in there. But the guy is Brendan Joe Williams in the
Oh,
United
yes.
States. Yeah. So
Yeah, he's
his
awesome.
website. I mean, I can put it in the chat group, but
Yeah. Our members
um,
are very aware of Brandon.
so a lot of this stuff people say, oh, it only applies to the United States. That's why, oh, yes and no. Stuff that has to do with the Constitution, yes, because we don't have one here.
Mhm.
But anything that has to do with money, what is money, bills of exchange, discharge of debt, how to remove yourself from the system, the word trickery, he has fantastic videos, fantastic knowledge, and gives it all away for free.
Yes, yes, he does. He has a great website. I remember like taking another step. I remember working in an insurance company when I was in my early 20s, and I was the hardworking employee. And we all know how the corporate structure is created. You have the hardworking employees at the bottom of the pyramid, and then the middle management, upper management, board of directors, and then the CEO. And not once in my 14 years of working for any of those corporations was I ever offered the opportunity to vote in the CEO. So we all know CEOs are appointed, and that goes for every corporation, including the Corporation of Canada and every province. And that's something that every man and woman in Canada has to really wrap their mind around in order to really free themselves. That this voting system that we have perceived that we have. Yeah, we've never voted anyone in. They've always been appointed. And that is something that when we really get that, like a lot of our members are unregistering themselves from the voters list. And it's just so great to see that once we really stand in our truth to know that this charade, this house of cards is going to eventually fall down, which is very, very exciting. Okay, I have another question for Tim, and then I'll get to you, Xander. Uh, who is the real sovereign in each province?
Who's the real sovereign? The people.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people then ask me, well, who is that? And I say, well, that's a good question because technically everyone who sits on the land, but does that include permanent residents? Does that include recent immigrants? Some people say, no, it should only be the indigenous people. And I say, well, what does that mean? We kick everyone out? That's not fair either. So there has to be a distinction made of everyone has a seat at the table. We're not saying indigenous people are left out. No, of course not. They are the ones who were on the land first. They have a title to the land. But then I think you need to include everyone else who is currently on the land as well. Um, not illegals or criminals. We'd have to see that maybe they don't get a seat at the table, but everyone else is on the land, has a seat at the table, and can participate in a constitutional convention, have input. But yeah, to answer your question, the real sovereign is not some stupid king in on some island or some old queen that never was a queen. If you really go down the rabbit hole about Elizabeth II, you will find some really nasty things.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And so the real sovereign, it's us, living men and women, not persons.
Yes, exactly. We are constantly reminding our members, delete the word person, delete the word citizen, because citizen is still allegiance too, right? So, and even resident as well. Yeah, thank
Yeah.
you, Kim. That was excellent. Okay, Xander, so great to meet you, and thank you for standing for freedom. I have two questions for you. So, can you give us a little bit about your background and how you aligned with Tim and Doug?
I was born and raised in Winnipeg and going through the public school systems like everybody does, like grade 10, 11, 12, whatever, you start learning about the so-called history of Canada, which I've now looked at it from perspective of after actually reading the documents, which is I always found it interesting that they never actually show you anything. Like when I was in high school, they didn't show us any of the documents. They just told us the story, right? Of like how we kind of followed in the US's footpath or footprints, right? And like, but much later, right? Like a couple, what was it, like 100 years later or so. And it never really resonated with me because I've always been somebody that's like, well, show me, right? Like I don't want to hear a story, like show me the proof,
Right.
right? So it from very early on in my life, like I kept hearing the stories because we always got like TV feeds from the States, right? And it's back in the 80s, right? See, you'd always see the Americans talking about, their constitution and their rights and all this stuff, right? And how proud they were of it and how they would stand up for it. But I didn't see that so much here, right? Like I never heard anybody talking about our constitution. I was like, well, why not? Like that you would think that would be a really important document to teach in school, right? Like,
Mhm.
and it never popped up. So I always had that nagging feeling inside that something wasn't right, kind of what Tim was saying. But I had mine way back in the 80s when I was learning about this stuff in school, and or not learning about it. But around 2011, I think around there, 2012, I was going around on YouTube, and I came across an interview with Doug with I think it was Richard Syrett's radio show out of Toronto, I think, and it was posted on Richard Syrett's site on YouTube there, and I listened to it, and it was Doug talking about like the deception that had happened, and that hit like a chord in me because it plucked that chord of like doubt that I had, like, okay, what is going on here? And I listened to that interview probably about like 10 times
Mhm.
because it's not just one thing, right? It's not like one event. There's like a whole series of events that took place over basically the whole time that this landmass has been known as Canada. And there's a whole bunch of markers that you gotta pay attention to and learn about to put the puzzle together because it's really complicated when you're coming in fresh and you've never heard this stuff before. It can get really overwhelming. But
Yes.
I just started reading the documents that I found Doug's website, themythiscanada.com, and I started cruising around that site. And then I was like, okay, look, like you're gonna have to read these documents if you're really gonna understand this. So I spent like years, on and off, just reading the entire document. And then I bookmarked the Black's Law Dictionary because there's a lot of legalese terms that don't apply in regular conversational English, right? Like person, right? People think a person is you and me sitting here, and it's not. In the legalese, it's a totally different meaning. And so I just started learning that stuff, like just teaching myself, like, okay, you've got to learn these maxims of law and stuff, and all these other things that come into play. Because I'm not a lawyer. I was trained as a welder, and I'm trying to get my class one license now so I can drive around till I'm old and gray. But I just started digging into it and just started reading it. And then as I started reading the documents, I started watching other people talk about the whole picture and being able to really understand what they were talking about. And then I'd go back and I'd reread stuff and just slowly started putting the puzzle together. And now like 15, almost 15 years later, I've read so many of these documents over and over and over again.
Hmm.
Because in order to teach it to people, you've got to know this stuff really well because
Yeah.
people are going to come at you with questions and you understand where they're coming from because you were there too. But when you're trying to teach people this stuff, you've really got to know what you're talking about because you'll also get people that are going to come in with their own agendas and they're going to try and stump you. They're going to try and say like, oh no, you don't know what you're talking about, which is why I kept always tell people stick to what the documents state. Like
Mhm.
it's not super complicated. It's just that you've got to pick out certain areas. There's sections of documents that are applicable to the story. And it's not that you throw out the rest of it, but it's not, it's kind of superfluous because a lot of the stuff in like some of these documents, it's just setting up like the BNA Act from 1867. It's just setting up a dictatorship. It's really what it's doing, and that's why it's not a constitution. Like it's literally setting up a corporation soul and then listing who has the authority, who's there to aid and advise, how much they're going to get paid, how they get picked or appointed or voted in, all this stuff. And so it can get overwhelming to people that aren't in there, and they lose their train of thought or their focus on it, because it's kind of dry too for most people. But I just started reading this stuff, and then I did that interview with David Whitehead during the um I think it was about 22, I think 2022. I was in his chat and I just saw people that were waving the charter around, right? Because it was right around the time of the trucker convoy, or a little bit after that, maybe. And I was watching everybody in Ottawa saying our rights, our rights, our rights. And I kept going on these chats and saying, like, the charter hasn't been ratified. Like, it doesn't have any standing in law. And even if it was, it wouldn't apply to you. And then I just noticed that so many people had never read it, because I would say, like, have you even read it? And I'd throw stuff up there and they'd look at it, and then they'd either block me, or they would just be crickets. They wouldn't say anything. And I was just trying to figure out why, because it's
Right.
it's such
Right.
a bizarre behavior to me. Like, for me as a logical mind, like, I want to see the evidence. And when I see it, it's like, if it challenges something that I believed before, then I'm going to re-examine it. And if it's actually coming forward as being the actual truth, then I'm going to discard the old thing or the old belief, right? And be like, well, that's not right. I had that wrong.
Yeah,
And
I love
I see
that,
that all the time
Xander.
on Twitter now, because there's so much movement now for, like, this whole argument about, Trump throwing up the 51st state stuff. And, like, watching Canadians' reaction to this, it just really highlights how little they understand
I
their
know.
own country's history. Because nobody's ever, I would say 99.9% of the people that I interact with on, like, X or Twitter, we're going to call it, have never read this stuff.
No,
And
no.
that's why I was talking with Tim, and, like, we should make something. And he was awesome about doing it. I didn't really know he was doing it at first. That was all on him. But, like, he would ask me questions about it. He'd ask Doug questions about it. And
Hmm.
I'm super stoked that he did it, because it lays everything out as basically boiled down as much as you can. I
Hmm.
don't think you could really do a video where you tell everybody what has happened and what the status is in a shorter amount of time,
No.
showing the documents.
Thank you, Xander.
You can go to the Mythos Canada site because it's all there for you in PDF form, but you can go online and just do a search and type in the title of that. It's all public record.
Mm,
They don't hide it. It's just that they understand, a lot of people don't understand how to read this stuff and don't want to take the time to read it, because some of them are long,
yes.
right?
Yes. And it is dry.
And
I get it. Absolutely.
yeah, so and it can be dry for people who aren't really, into that type of reading stuff.
Yeah.
But for people like me and Tim and Doug and all the other ones that actually want to see the evidence, see the receipts, I
Hmm.
mean, it's there.
I know that you briefly touched on it. Can you give us your three favorite documents that you think people need to really look at?
The three most important ones would be the original 1867 British North American Act, because that's the original document, right? That started the whole thing. And most people think that it's a constitution, and it's not. It absolutely categorically is not a constitution. And you'll see that when you read it, because it's setting up a corporation sole, and then a, creating a dictatorship with a governor general that has absolute power to rule, and then everything underneath that, like the Privy Council, the Senate, the ministers, right, in the House of Commons, the Prime Minister and all the other ministers in there, the lieutenant governors in the provinces, and then their governments underneath them, right, like the Premier and all the legislators underneath that. All that whole system is there to aid and advise the Governor General, and it's set up in the 1867 BNA Act, and it lists it out there. It's like, it starts off where it even tells you Section 3 is the Union, right? And the Union consisted of the province of Canada, which is Upper and Lower Canada, which was Quebec and Ontario, Nova Scotia and New Brunswick. So there's only four to start with, and they just unite them together. And the document after that um, is the 1889 Interpretations Act, because in Section 18, paragraph 2 and 3 of that document, it tells you and confirms that there was no confederation, and states that the Dominion of Canada is a British possession and colony. It says it right there in black and white. In section 2, it states that the Dominion of Canada or dominions having a local and central legislature. And at that time, Canada was the only one that had a local and a central legislature. So that's like where the provincial parliament buildings are. That's your local, right? And then the central was in Ottawa. They are a British possession and colony. So I mean that blows the whole Confederation story right out of the water, and it's in the documents. So those two, and then the other really important one is the Statute of Westminster because it ends it all. Those are the three big ones, and the Statute of Westminster is not long. And the three sections in there, like Tim said earlier, is section 2, 7, and 11 that get rid of what in the late 1800s, the Statute of Westminster gets rid of the Letters Patent Revocation Act. So that gets rid of the ability for the Crown and Chancery to appoint and issue letters patent to the Governor General. So it strips the Governor General of his powers, right? They can't appoint them. And it negates the entire British North American Act from 1867 in Section 11. So it wipes it all out. And then after that, there's a bunch of documents that I find really hilarious because it just highlights how desperate they are to keep this hidden. And they keep throwing up these acts or these statutes or these, documents they put out where they're throwing up illusionary roadblocks, right? Or they're throwing up like how they did the Income Tax Act in 48, like the shenanigans that they pulled to create the illusion of legitimacy to the Income Tax Act in 1948. Like before they did it, they had to do a bunch of stuff to make it look legitimate because they didn't have the authority to do anything or enact anything. So they had to do all these shenanigans before to make it look legitimate. And it's just ridiculous. Like Doug goes through this in his interviews with people.
Yes.
I figured it out because I read the documents. There's the Royal Styles and Titles Act in 52, I think, where Queen Elizabeth appoints herself the Queen of Canada. Like, how does that work? And that's a short document you can read, and she literally appoints herself the Queen Right of Canada and has the Prime Minister sign off on it. It's like this. They didn't consult anybody. They consult us, the people, and say like, "Hey, do you want her to be the Queen?" They just appoint her. Like she just appoints herself. Even the Clarity Act in 2000, that one gets thrown up a lot too by people who don't understand. Because anytime Alberta or Quebec talk about wanting to leave or secede Canada, people will throw up the Clarity Act and go, "Oh, you can't do this. You have to jump through all these hoops." And if you actually read the Clarity Act and you understand what they're saying, it's just another huge jumble. It's literally like they're taking, like you're trying to block, like in a riot, you're trying to block a road. You're just grabbing everything you possibly can to throw in the road to stop somebody from leaving. The Clarity Act 2000 is basically like that, but it's just all illusionary objects they're throwing in front to try to dissuade people from trying to secede from a federation that never existed in the first place.
You can see how Zan is very passionate about all these topics. I would say if people wanted to start like key documents, definitely the 1867 BNA Act, the 1889 or any recent Interpretations Act to see, even just looking up the definition of Canada and see that it's only defined as water, and definitely the 1931 Statute of Westminster. Those are key documents to read. Everything in between, whoever really wants to know the history and how the government has done things and the British monarchy, sure. But those I would say are the key documents to really try and understand what has been done and what we currently have.
Thank you, Tim.
Yeah.
Thank you, Xander. Yeah, Esther just put them in the chat. So thank you, Esther, for doing that. I'm going to be sharing what is known as mega regions in an upcoming episode. If anyone remembers Rosa Cora, she was educating everyone on the Agenda 21 years ago. And back then, she was sharing with everyone that the One World Government plan has been here for a century, over a century, like I would say many centuries. And so she was a part of it, and she realized that it was not going to be for the people. So she began to speak out about it. And It's known as the mega regions, and you can Google it, mega regions. One of the regions is it's called the Cascadia mega region, and on their map is so I think there's 11 regions. So they're going to be taking everyone from the towns, right? This is the whole plan, taking people from the towns and putting them into big mega cities. And yeah, so the Cascadia region, it includes Oregon, Montana, BC, and then she says more into Canada. So I'm assuming because Montana is below Alberta, so that would include Alberta as well. And so I think this is why they're talking about mega. They're getting ready for the whole languaging around these mega regions. But this has been in the works for a very, very long time. It's nothing new. And she said too that every premier, every prime minister, every president in every country is all a part of this one world government agenda. And one of the regions is Northern California. I can't remember the name of it, but it's Northern California and then parts of Mexico. So Canada, US, and Mexico all become one big connected region, but 11 mega regions in between. So this has been in the works for a long time. So when we look at what you're talking about earlier, is in regards to Canada and the United States. This system, as you were saying, it's been in place, the corporate system. It's been in place for a very long time. And so then you talk about Trump and people are like, oh, 51st state. And they're basically talking about the birth certificate aspect, right? That all of our identification is just moving from the Service Corporation of Canada to the Service Corporation of the United States. It's already been in the private ledger, but now they're going to allow for the public, the masses, to know what's been happening for a really long time. So at Lifers Canada, we're really teaching our members to create a private trust, which is going to become extremely important. So many of our private members are focusing on creating trust now, which is really, really good. And yeah, so statehood is really about sovereignty as well. So this is, yeah, it's a really important to have these conversations. And I'm so glad that you created that, produced that film, because more and more people need to really have an understanding of the true history of Canada and the shenanigans. I love that.
That's the thing I want to drive home too, is like I see this all the time, especially now with the whole, like I was saying, with like, Trump threatening the 51st state thing. It's like there's this huge, huge battle going on. I'm seeing it on the social media where you have people are like, yeah, let's do it because I'm tired of paying all the taxes and the government doesn't listen to us and all this stuff. Right. So to think that you can elect somebody in Ottawa or in your provincial government who's going to stand up and say, hey, guess what? This whole thing's a fraud, let's fix it. Like that's not gonna happen.
We are unstoppable. Tim, what's your
But
solution?
people seem to be trapped in a massive amount of Stockholm syndrome on this landmass because they think, well, I'm so tied to this illegitimate government that also gives me my hockey games on TV that I want to watch and my bars where I go drinking. I don't have time to read. I want someone to do the solution for me. Well, that's not how it's going to work. Nobody's going to come to save you. You have to save yourself. And that means if you don't like something on a local level at a school board, go in and put your foot down, say something. If you don't like something in a community, maybe you want to be on the board, maybe you want to get involved. And that's ultimately what it's going to take. This whole system is not going to just peacefully say, okay, guys, you got us, fine, we'll go away. No. Um, they are going to try to push us into some violence to make us to shut us all down. So you don't want to give them violence. Anything that we can do is really the first step is stop paying attention to the system. People are
Yeah.
constantly feeding it with their energy, and as soon as you stop doing that, the system doesn't get your energy anymore. Try to remove your consent. Anytime you have to sign a form, know how to sign it so that you're actually retaining your rights. Sign it without prejudice. A financial document, sign it without recourse. So you distinguish yourself from your person. That's another show we could do to talk more about detail in this stuff. But it's really stop giving consent to the system. And ultimately, I think the system will collapse when there is a financial collapse. That's when all of this will go away. That's when the police officers will actually join the people because nobody will pay their wages anymore. That's how we're going to do it. Don't try to shoot yourself out of this. That's not going to work. That's not the right way to do it. Voting yourself out of it, I think we have seen that over the last several decades that does absolutely nothing. So stop giving consent, stop feeding it with your energy, get engaged on local levels, get engaged, even just teaching younger people, teaching other people, educating them. That might take a while. Some people, it might take a year to plant a seed, but it really starts with, learn some of these facts, read about it. We can have shows about it, and then just stop giving consent and stop feeding it with your energy.
Yes, no more consent. Okay, Esther, I do believe there's quite a few questions in the chat. I'm going to pass the torch over to you. Thank you, Tim and Xander. This is great.
Thank you. A couple of questions before we get to the chat ones. Will politicians be part of the solution, Tim?
Absolutely not. The solution cannot have any corporate like interference whatsoever. There can be no lawyers. There are actually no lawyers on this landmass because we don't have law of the land. What we have are bar-carded attorneys. That's what we have. They're not lawyers. So you can't have any corporate interference, and politicians are corporate interference. So the politicians, if they want to join as living men and women, of course, we should invite them. Everyone is invited. But if anyone wants to start pulling strings, pulling it into corporate jurisdiction and trying to take advantage, they should be kicked out immediately and shown the door and never be invited back.
Thank you. And the second one, you were just talking about solutions a few moments ago. How can we make sure that this fraud never ever happens again?
Well, I think that's where, uh, if you go back to the 14th century, if the king pulled something like this, he would be dragged out on the market square. His head would be chopped off. His son's head would be chopped off too. And that's how you make sure that the next guy who comes around doesn't make the same mistake. Now, we probably don't want to do that. I would like to see certain people who have committed horrific crimes. I would like to see them, dragged through not the court system because they own the court system. So it would have to be a people's court system, and then put in jail forever. I actually think people always say someone like Bill Gates, he should be dead. And I think no, because then you make it really easy for him. What I would like to do is take everything away he has, all his wealth, all his toys, all his homes, make him live in a dirty little mobile home with no shower, make him line up for jobs, make him apply for jobs and get fired and get social security and line up at the food bank. That's how you really punish him the most. So how do we make sure this never happens again? Well, the evil people who have participated, they need to see consequences. And how do we deal with corporations and the power they get? A lot of this was done without people actively seeing it. So there needs to be a lot more transparency. There needs to be a lot more, um, you know, maybe more people just constantly having conventions and voting. Everything needs to be more public, more transparent, so that you can drag the power in the background when nobody pays attention.
Yeah, it's got to be the people that stay vigilant. That's how you prevent it, right? Like you can put stuff in the constitutions that could bar secret societies. You could put laws forward and stuff like that type of thing. But if the people, the sovereigns on the sovereign land who choose how they're going to be governed, if they don't stay vigilant, like you're going to get evil springing up. Like it's happened over and over and over again. And you look at what happened in the States, like they're having a bit of a renaissance now where the people are starting to stand up again and get involved at the local level and starting to root out these rats, right? That have taken advantage of it. But to prevent the evil from getting back into the corporate lingo and stuff from getting back in, that has to be monitored by the people, because it's ultimately us who decide how we're going to live.
Thank you, Xander. Deborah asks, so if the Crown does not own the land, has the Corporation of Canada stolen the land? You may have already addressed this. I'm going to go in order. So some of these questions were asked earlier.
A corporation cannot really own land. So here's what's happening. The corporate entity doesn't have the land. That's why in the Interpretations Act, and I think the latest one is 1985, if I'm not mistaken, Canada is defined as water. There is no definition of land. So that tells you, okay, they don't have the land. They call it crown land to keep up an illusion that, well, the people don't have it either. Actually, we do. You could walk onto the crown land. You could survey a plot of land by using the old way of surveying, meets and bounds. You can take 300 acres, put a sign up for about 30 days that you declare that this is your land, because it is allodial, it is sovereign land since 1931. If nobody objects, you can technically claim it. It's yours. So the corporations have not stolen the land per se. They're just keeping it hostage. And the way they're doing it is if you go through a land title process to get your own property as a land patent, allodial title, you would go through a process to get to the original crown grant that the king or the queen at the time granted to a corporation to start developing that land. And it's different in every province, different years, different methodology. But these crown grants, for example, in BC, where I am, it's from 1901, and it was by King, I forget his name now, they're all whatever. But the original crown grant, all written in handwriting and meets and bounds describing where the land is, who gets to develop it. Those crown grants are worth billions of dollars today. Why? Because the government is in such huge debt. Looking at our Prime Minister Trudeau, not anymore, but he never was to begin with, he printed so much money, they took on so much additional debt from the Bank of International Settlements that they will default on their debt. And that's planned. This fiat system was never meant to last more than 100 years. So when the government defaults on the debt, each province has in their safe the original crown grant. That's what they're going to give to the international bankers when they want to collect some collateral on the debt. So everyone who thinks they own their land and their house because they have a certificate of title, that's when you listen to Brenton Joe Williams, he will tell you what a certificate of title really is. You don't own any of it. You handed it over to the government. You just paid double for it through the mortgage. The word certificate means something exists somewhere else. That's what the meaning of certificate is. It does not mean that you have title to the land. But the original crown grant, that's what each province keeps in their safe.
Corinne says she has an example of a handwritten allodial title. Are you okay if she shares screen with that, or should we wait?
Yes, absolutely.
So Corinne, if you have, oh, you're going to show it like that. Okay, go ahead. There we go.
That thing.
So that's what it looks like.
Thank you,
Yep.
Corinne. This is great. Yay for you. And it's a true copy, right?
It's a true copy. So it took me 6 months to get a copy of this. They actually, because it's in high security in the National Archives in Ottawa. And once I went through and did my title searches, and Doug did the declaration, so I was determined to get a true copy of the actual original, which Doug says you'll never get it. And so I kind of persevered, and it took me 6 months. And I was the only person in the National Archives that have actually taken a true copy of our Crown Grant. and they were shocked at how the archivists were shocked at how we even got this because I had to go through a number of security. They had to go through a number of security people to get the key to the vault to get it out. And it was unbelievable the security process they had to go through. And the woman who got it said, "Do you realize that this is a legal document and it's worth a lot of money?" And I kind of just played it like, oh, is that right? Because I didn't want to sort of let on and do any red flags because they were shocked that I was even able to get through the process. So it just goes to show how important it is that mine's a homestead grant from 1860 under Queen Victoria, and it's signed. It's just incredible. And it cost me $60 to get it, and it's stamped. You can see I got them to stamp it at the back.
That's so great.
You can see that. So it is possible to get. It just takes time and perseverance, and you got to use the kind of the way you can't. You got to be very nice to these people. You can't start demanding and saying, "Well, it's my God-given right and all this." You can't do that because they're going to shut you down.
Yes.
So I just said we're doing a family historical project. And our daughter actually, she's an archaeologist and cultural anthropologist. So she kind of helped us sort of do the wording around this to get to the people that we needed to get to in Ottawa. So that was a great help as well. So we just kind of said it was a historical project, that family project that we were doing. And they said, oh, okay. But they were very, very reluctant to even talk to us or even for us to even get a copy of this. So it is possible. Just have to be kind, the wording, all of that.
And I think that's important to be kind because a lot of these people that we think they're all evil,
right?
99% of the people are not. They just simply don't know.
Absolutely.
And they're just trapped in it like we used to be trapped, and they're just doing their job. But if you treat them badly, they will just shut down and think, well, I don't like this. It's not like they're in on it. There's just 1% that really know and are in on it.
Right. That's absolutely right.
And Corinne, I just wanted to remind you, you don't need to call yourself a person anymore.
Okay.
Go ahead, back to you, Esther.
Okay, thank you. That was great, Corinne. I hope you documented your steps, and maybe we could talk about creating paperwork for that. I would love to have a conversation with you. Aaron asked, why did Danielle Smith swear an oath to the king in her inauguration?
Zan, do you want to answer that?
The whole system is set up on an archaic system that's not like lawful anymore. So to keep the illusion going, who are they going to swear to? There's no documentation here. There's no constitution that states who they have to swear allegiance to. Like, it's all archaic. The whole setup, like I said before, like the governor general is a figurehead. There's no jurisdiction of power anywhere on the land. We just saw Carney swear allegiance to the King of Canada, which is laughable because we don't have a king. But he also does the oath of secrecy. That should tell you right there that they're up to, again, like they're pulling some shenanigans, man. Like, why would you need to take an oath of secrecy when you get sworn into office? Like, what secret are you keeping, and who are you keeping them from? The fact that people need to understand there's no legal obligation on the landmass known as Canada for politicians to abide by anything that they say in their campaign promises, and two, they're not legally bound to their constituents. There's nothing in our legal.
Doesn't that tie into the Little Child case?
Yeah, I was just going to say, like, the Little Child case set the precedent back in 1990, and you can go read that. That's Doug's got that on his Mythos Canada site, but that set the legal precedent. They're not legally bound to anything that they say or do when they're in office to the people. Like, they can say whatever they want, going to get elected. Like Jay Littlechild got elected on voting against the GST. And like 80% of the votes were for him because they were like, awesome. Like, we don't want the GST. He gets to Ottawa and he votes yes on the GST. So they tried to haul him to court and say, you lied to us. Like, you told us you weren't going to do that. And he did. And the judge ruled and stated that although contrary to, what would seem logical, there's no law anywhere that I can find that states that they're bound to their campaign promises or their constituents. And that's like, they swear allegiance to this crown because who else are they going to do it to? And if they don't do it to that whole illusion that falls apart, because it's all based on what happened when we were a colony. And instead of telling people like, okay, we're not a colony anymore, like in 31, they basically just said, no, some things happen, but everything's the same. Just keep going. Because the people in power didn't want to lose their paychecks. They didn't want to lose their pensions. They didn't want to lose power and control. So they just kept rolling like everything stayed the same. Everything about this country is an illusion.
And the sad thing is that a lot of people, if you
That's
look,
why they do it.
yeah, if you're looking at Daniel Smith, a lot of any premier, they think that their premier has sworn allegiance to the people,
Yeah.
which is so not
No.
true.
No.
Back to you, Esther.
Thank you. The next question from Oleg. How could an empire so easily give up their monarchy over the colonies? It doesn't sound believable because the empire usually leaves control over newly established countries by hiding controlling mechanisms. They would not give up simply. So why did they do it, or how was that so easy?
I think that ties in 1931. So for one, it was Russell Roger Smith with William Lyon Mackenzie King assisting him in sneaking in certain terminology into these sections of the Statute of Westminster. And I think at the time, I think the British were in a little bit of trouble. Also, when they did the Balfour Declaration, they might not have paid close attention to the wording that was actually in there. And lastly, that's when also right around the corner the Great Depression hit. So I think there were just a lot of things going on where once it was passed, people realized, oh damn, what just happened? But you couldn't reverse it. That was it. It was done. Doug may have some more facts that play in 1931 why the British gave it up. I don't think they gave it up really knowingly and willingly. They might have thought it's better to let it go. But it was really sort of, hiding it in there in Section 11, especially, that as soon as this is passed, it's all over.
Yeah, because what I read about that time was Mackenzie King had come to Russell and said, is there anything you'd like to add into this? And that's when Russell threw in Section 2, Section 7, and Section 11, because he and his group, what were they, the Native Sons of Canada, right, Tim? Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
Yeah, Native Sons. They were a group of guys that were meeting to discuss how to address the constitutional crisis that we had here. Like, and they were just like regular guys, right? That were getting together that just knew what the story was. And Mackenzie King was good friends with Russell Rogers Smith and asked him, as a guy who was considered a constitutional expert, is there anything that you'd like to add? Was he just put in the language that would free the provinces from basically being under the crown's foot?
Thank you, Xander. And another question, follow up on that. Why couldn't they reverse it after it was passed? Tim answers, because they did not have the authority anymore. It's similar to selling your house after it's sold. You want to go back and change something about the garage? Well, you gave it up, so it's not yours anymore.
Yeah.
So we'll just do that. And Deborah asks, so then what happens to all the allodial titles? And you were just talking about this, Tim, why do they still call it Crown Land, and why does everyone think that it is Crown Land? It's part of the deception that's been going on.
It's part of the illusion to make people think, oh, it's not our land. Well, it is your land.
Yep.
But they can't just tell you, well, it is your land, but we don't want you to touch it, because then people say, well, come and try. But if you keep them in an illusion of, well, it's crown land, it belongs to the queen, now the king, and we can't really touch it, only if we grant it to a corporation that can then go and chop all the trees off, that's okay. So people are having a lot of thoughts about it and questions, and that's the reason why they keep it that way, to keep the illusion up.
Thank you. A question from Lonnie. In the Municipal Government Act, it states they can switch from legal powers to natural person powers to facilitate policies, acquisitions, etc. Can you shed a bit of light on this? Would enjoy hearing your take.
A natural person is a person. Don't get confused by the word natural in front of it. A person is a person. No matter how many words you put in front of it, it still is a legal fiction. Just like an individual is a sole proprietorship. If anyone is, if it's not called a living man or woman, it is not you and it shouldn't apply to you unless you work for the government. That's what people need to really comprehend. Any of these regional district documents, municipal documents, they're all really internal corporate statutes, and they only apply to whoever works for this corporation. If you work your daily job and you're employed by some corporation, you need to sign their ethics form. You need to abide by their rules. So if you one day show up to work naked and drunk, they'll probably escort you out of the office and tell you, hey, you shouldn't really be doing this because our laws say so. It's the same with any municipal acts, with any in BC, they're trying to push really hard to control how people rent their properties. At the end of the day, it shouldn't apply to you if you don't work for them. They might call it, as you said just now, a natural person, and that they try to deceive you with that again. But a natural person is still a person, and that's a legal fiction.
Thank you. And the follow-up on that from Lonnie was he spent some time reading that book and learned early that he would be spending lots more time in Black's Law and also Webster's dictionaries. And I think we all have to do that. If we're going to read those three resources that you suggested, we're going to have to go back and forth between the dictionaries for quite
Yeah.
some time. Thank you. Karina asks, is there truth behind you will own nothing and be happy? For example, our properties. And you mentioned this earlier. We don't really own our properties. Can you comment?
Yeah, we don't, because what it's deception through wording and documents that, I mean, most of us are guilty when we buy a house. We're sitting in the lawyer's office. We don't read the documents. We might glance over half of the stuff. We have no idea what it says. And we sign it because we're so excited that we finally have our own house. And when you go into Brandon Joe Williams explains this fantastically. When you even get the mortgage loan, with your signature, you are the one who created that money out of thin air. Fiat currency. It doesn't really exist because it's not backed by gold. So you created it. The bank should actually say, hey, fantastic, we'll take 10,000, the rest we'll give to you. That's how they should do it. But no, they take it all and they get it from the central bank with the interest right away. Then they give it back to you at interest. So you're paying double for something that you shouldn't have had to pay for in the first place because you created the money. However, we're so excited. We have a house and then we get a certificate of title. And that is another deception in itself, just like the title of car insurance or car ownership. This title basically transfers jurisdiction over to the corporation. You get a certificate of title making you think that you own it because you have the title, but the word certificate really just means something exists somewhere else and you're just the beneficiary of that part, but you don't really own it. So that is with land ownership, or in the end, the corporation has to collapse for this to basically resolve itself. You can try and fight it. You can try to send them angry letters and you don't want to pay property taxes and they should give it back to you. They will not. Because if they admit one case, that sets precedent and they don't want that. So
Right.
do we want to beat them down? No, because as I said, most of the people have no idea what they're doing wrong. They're just doing their job. It's not their fault. It's the corporate entity at the top that doesn't even sit on this landmass. The head office is probably registered in Delaware and maybe sitting in Switzerland. So you can't really get to them. And ultimately, the best we can do is set them up for failure and hoping that we get a big collapse where they financially collapse. Everyone gets dragged down with it, of course. But that's the ultimate, I think what needs to happen is a big financial collapse.
When one of us might say to somebody, yeah, Canada is a corporation, not a country, and they respond with saying, oh, well, Canada just had to sign up because in order to trade, they have to be a part of the SEC. And so therefore, that's the only reason they're still a country. We know this isn't true, but how would you respond to that?
That's tricky because people have been so mind manipulated over many decades that you can't just bombard them with facts. They immediately shut down. and they yell at you, run away, or they might even call you fascist, anti-Semitic, and who else, whatever words they found on television. You really have to counter with almost a question. Just say, really? I didn't know that. Is that true? Can you show me articles of confederation and then walk away? And hopefully you plant a seed that they will look it up. And similar things happened to me where then my due diligence, I didn't just blindly believe what was on Doug's website. I contacted the government, the parliamentary archives directly with the Freedom of Information request. I wanted to have articles of confederation. They could not produce them. They didn't just ignore me. No, they admitted in an email they can't produce them. They don't have any. I asked about a copy of the signed Charter of Rights and Freedoms that is signed by everyone. They couldn't produce it. It does not exist. So this is where you would just hopefully plant a seed with a simple question, and don't get mad at the people that they claim this or ask this, because they don't know any better and they feel attacked. They feel like their bubble of comfort is being infringed upon, and they don't want it to burst because then they're afraid. They don't know what to do. So the best is really ask a simple question, walk away, and hopefully they come back at some point and ask more questions.
Thank you so much, Tim and Xander. Back over to you, Karen.
Thank you, Esther. Brilliant job as always. Okay, Xander, we only have about 5 minutes left, but I'm going to ask you and Tim for your final words. So wrap it up in 2 minutes, Xander. What would be your final, this is what we need to do, people. Let's get it together.
The thing I always tell people is you've got to learn this stuff, because you're not going to get this kind of information from any politicians. You're not going to get it from the media. Even the bigger platforms don't really talk about this. Like Tim was saying, like they're starting to attack us, and they have nothing to attack us with. They just throw up really silly, arguments about it. But like I always tell people, like find people like me, Tim, or Doug, or there's other people out there that are on the different platforms that know about this stuff, and just listen to what they have to say, and then go look at it yourself. Because you going around and talking to your family and your friends, right? Like it's like if you do that, and it just starts spreading by word of mouth, because ultimately it has to be us that's going to change this, the way that we're governed, right? The way that we're going to run this, the way we want our lives to be. It has to be a shared experience for us, and we have to come on the same page. And one of the things you see all the time from the powers that be here is, what do they always try to do? They always try to pit us against each other. Educate yourself about this stuff, and then just start talking to people around you. And like Tim said, the easiest way to keep people's defenses down is to ask them questions.
Thank you for that. Tim, your final words of encouragement.
My final words of encouragement. Well, I would say please read the documents, comprehend the wording, and see for yourself. You might have to read them 5 times in a row and go back to the film, and you don't, if you don't want to watch the film, on the website you can download a PDF that shows all the screens with all the information, to really familiarize yourself with how it was done and when what was done, because knowledge is key. You can discuss that with others and raise questions, and nobody is expecting you to immediately go and be all active and be involved and fight this and do this. It's a lot of information. It's overwhelming. When you realize that you've been living in an illusion, like a lie, for many, many years, it's a harsh wake-up call, and it takes time for people to adjust and realize, well, what do we do from here? And what's most important is to know that you're not alone. There are a lot of people out there, a lot of people that know some of this or all of this, and happy to connect, happy to help out. And I think ultimately we need to stick together, come up with a game plan, know what to do. If you're angry, do not let the anger trigger you. Do not get violent. That's what they want. Stay calm, be kind, practice forgiveness. That's not for the benefit of the one who harmed you. That's for the benefit of you and your anger. The next film is still in production. the deception of the flag. That's another one
Oh,
that's really
yes. I'm so
that's
looking forward to that one.
that's
That's a
mind-blowing
big
for
one.
people. Film, it will be shown in detail how this government is a corporation, who are
Yeah,
the sub-corporations, who owns the flag, what does it represent. So
it's
that's
not,
coming.
yes, it's not for the people.
I, no,
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tim and Xander. This is so great. Because we're not at a live event and we can't clap for you, we're just gonna your hands.
thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for showing up today. We have such a dedicated tribe, and many of them have been with me since 2020. We started Life First Canada in 2020, and we've had, I would say, probably 20 videos taken off of YouTube. We've been banned many times. And so I'm so grateful that your video is still there. And it's so funny because last week I had 52,000 views, and then I looked today and there's 54,000 views. So it's still climbing, which is so great to see. I love it. And to me, I truly believe that the main solution is tapping into our spirituality, tapping into the heart. Because if we do not know ourselves, they're still going to be governing and they're still going to be pushing fear porn and so many different agendas that where our mind is going to be so distracted. And if we don't know who we are mentally, emotionally, and spiritually, it will drain us. So really important to make sure that you have a spiritual practice in place to connect to the heart, because to me the heart is the power. And I'm going to be teaching this on April 11th to 13th, that if your energy, your heart is actually an energy vortex generator, and the more you learn how to work with your energy field, your life force energy, 5G and everything they throw at you, you will not affect you in a negative way at all, because you're going to be vibrating at a higher frequency. And the custodians of this world, they know that this reality is all based on frequency, vibration, and energy. So the more you get to know who you are on an energetic level, you rise up, you ascend out of the whole, what I call below the line, the below the line control matrix, and it no longer affects us. And then we stand as sovereign. Then we stand in our heart space and move forward, and we just take back our power in so many incredible ways. We are brilliant, and especially when we come in together like this, as a collective with heart and mind connecting and listening to brilliant men like Tim and Xander. I've already reached out to Karen Hanna. We're going to be booking more dates with the both of you.
Perfect.
Yeah. Because all of this information is so key, and the more that you listen to it, the more you say yes to it, the more it begins to integrate into the vessel, into your body, into the whole aspect of who you are. But we need to let go of, even Tim said this, we have to let go of the anger and the feelings of betrayal and all of that, because they want you to stay in fear. And you are so powerful, my friends. Thank you for being here. Together we rise.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
Thank
very
you.
much, everyone.
Thank you,
Thank
Kim.
you.
Booyah! Thank you.
And
Thank
Kat.
you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Presentation.
Good night.